And we have Premier Scott Moe here for our annual year-end interview, talking about energy issues with the oil patch, oil, lithium, helium, and
All things energy security.
exactly. So this year saw the war in Ukraine lead to a spike in oil prices, as well as potash prices, and huge increases in provincial revenues. This allowed your government to balance the budget, pay down some debt, and issue $500 checks. Mine hasn't shown up yet, by the way, yet.
Oh, isn't it?
No, not yet.
We'll have to talk with Minister Herpower.
The total value of those checks was close to the value of the increased oil revenues. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think it's only through the strength of our resource-based economy that creates wealth in community after community. It is really the source of our wealth in this province, that we were able to even make a decision like that. Never mind the decision to pay down $1 billion in deficit. Never mind the decision or the opportunity we had to balance the budget after the first quarter when we had entered the budget year 3 months earlier with projecting a $460 million deficit. And listen, you had said it's the war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is the precipitous of this spike in energy prices, in fertilizer prices, and that to some degree is true and highlights the situation we're in today. But I would say that there's more to it than that. What we've seen is the European Union has greatly sacrificed their energy security with policy decisions that they've been making for 10 or 15 years now, where they have not prioritized energy security in any way. In fact, they've made decisions to push any emitting industries out of their country or block of countries, thereby have ultimately been reliant on Russian oil, gas, and natural gas to coal to provide energy security for them, and that isn't a very secure environment as it turns out today. So, I've said numerous times that we should not be heading down this same wrongful policy path in North America. Yes, we should be concerned about the environment. Yes, we should identify and realize what innovation and investments have already been made in providing and producing much more sustainable products in this province than we did 5 and 10 years ago, certainly, and much more sustainable than are produced in other areas of the world. But we should also ensure that as we're going about our own policy development, that we are prioritizing energy and food security, not just for our nation, but likely for the continental U.S. and Canada.
I want to expand on that a little bit, because I've written a series of stories about how the Alberta Grid, which publishes data minute by minute, how I've written this story 10 times since June, where wind and or solar, or both, have collapsed to zero. Now, solar goes to zero every night. But earlier in December, 2 times in the same week, because wind dropped to essentially zero, the Alberta Grid issued a grid alert asking people not to run their dishwashers because they couldn't handle it. And yet, we don't even have hardly any electric vehicles plugged in to charge. And SaskPower has already said they're going to build 3,000 megawatts of wind and solar. Aren't we going down the same path Europe is?
No, you cannot listen. Wind and solar are never going to provide baseload power. They just are not going to provide baseload power. But they can help drive the cost of power down and drive down, essentially make it more affordable in your jurisdiction alongside whatever your baseload is going to be. And so, here's an example of a policy that I would say is much more ideologic in nature, and not in any way realistic in nature, and that is to phase out all coal-fired power. Let's use Saskatchewan as an example. Phase out all coal-fired power by 2030, as per the federal government intends to do. And then also phase out all natural gas by 2035, which is one of the criteria of the Clean Electricity Standard, which has been put forward by the federal government. Understanding that wind and solar will not create in any way baseload power capacity. How cold do you think it's going to be on January the 1st, 2036 in Saskatoon when the Queen Elizabeth power station is turned off? It just isn't realistic. It's not a realistic policy. It's not a policy that we should be paying a lot of credence to here in the province, but it's a policy that the federal government wants to discuss and move forward on. And this is the type of heading down the European path that I would say we simply shouldn't do. We, at the end of the day, are going to need more baseload power than we need today. And yes, we can incorporate renewables into that system to try to drive that cost down, but to rely on them just simply isn't realistic.
These are some of the considerations in drawing the line in the Task First Act, weren't they?
Well, that's correct. Not only power generation, but protecting our ag industry and protecting the development of our natural resources. We have a potash industry that is fortunately receiving a lot of investment. We have the uranium industry is receiving a lot of interest and investment. We have the helium industry. We have the lithium industry. We have the oil and gas industry, which quite frankly has been lined up to be profitable for a period of time now after some awful lean times. And isn't receiving its due investment, and I would say simply because of the uncertainty that's being provided by federal policy that's in the way between a profitable company not making investments back into the very industry that's creating that profit.
So the price of oil is lower now than it was when the war started, and that means the geopolitical risk has all but dissipated from the market. And the war's not over. We're still bringing in refugees. What does this mean for Saskatchewan? And are you concerned for Saskatchewan's budget?
Well, I think the number one concern that I have as it pertains to the energy industry in this province and in this nation is the lack of certainty that's being provided at the federal level, which is preventing investment back into the industry. That's the largest hang-up I think that the energy industry has. They produce some of the cleanest product that you can find on earth. They have companies that are making profits here today that likely in a much more certain environment would be reinvesting those profits into our communities, reinvesting them into the very industry that we have. And so that will change, I suspect, as federal government changes, which you're only one election away at the federal level from a significant change, of course. So am I concerned about the energy industry? In the long term, no. We're going to need oil on Earth for quite some period of time. I'm proud of the innovation and investment that Saskatchewan producers have made, whether it be in the heavy oil plays up in the North Battleford to Lloydminster area, or whether it be in the enhanced oil recovery and what they're doing in the southeastern portion of the province. We're very proud of not only what we're producing, but how we're producing it. And so in the long term, that is going to prevail. In the short term, there's some ideological, unrealistic policies that are coming out of the federal government that are really preventing the growth in that industry in this year and the next, and at least up till the next federal election.
So you mentioned heavy oil. So on Friday last week, WCS, Western Canadian Select, was $45 a barrel. WTI was $72 a barrel. I think it's $70 today. So we had about a $27 differential again. And this is something you spoke about many times in the past. What does this mean for us now that it's back?
Well, I don't. First of all, in today's environment, I'm not exactly certain I understand why it's back. To be quite frank with you, there's OPEC hasn't opened up the taps. I don't quite understand what's driving the oil pricing up today. But in saying that, regardless of where it is today and what the differential is today, we still have, if we agree on the fact that as we look over the next 5, 15, 20 years, that the oil industry in Saskatchewan would and needs to be part of the oil that is being provided to us in the world, we still have the age-old problems that we've had for the last number of decades. Egress is still going to be an issue. Getting product out. Ultimately, it will. As we get through these lean policy years and get to something better, we're likely going to have oil back on the trains in the not too distant future, despite having a new outlet to the west coast for the oil sands. So, the challenges really haven't changed. The short-term challenges have grown in the policy development of our federal administration. But in the longer term, our challenges are very similar to what they have been for quite a period of time, and that is, how do we get this product to market? And ultimately, then the shorter term challenge is how do we get, some policy development that will actually allow us to reinvest in the industry.
Some of the refugees that have come here are finding work in the oil patch, as well as other sectors of the economy. Our declining birth rate, which is 1.4 last year in Canada, coupled with the retirement of the baby boomers, means that continued labor shortages are going to be a reality in Canada and Saskatchewan basically forever.
Yep.
Is Saskatchewan looking at bringing in more refugees, and I mean like vast numbers of refugees and more immigrants to help counter that demographic trend?
Yeah. Yes. The short answer is yes. I think where we are today, we have about 6,000 provincial, 3,000 federal that come in. With the 500,000 number that the federal minister floated the other day, that puts us in the 15,000+ a year, which is helpful. We would need all of that, in particular in these years where we have a number of folks coming from the war-torn area of Ukraine to find a safer place in Saskatchewan. And so, but aside from that, if we're going to build everything that is, already committed to, and there's more in the wings, we most certainly are going to need more people here. We just hit 1.2 million people the other day. We're on track with our growth rate to hit 1.4. I would encourage you in the last half of December to watch for our quarterly report that will come out, because I have a feeling that it's going to be, very positive, a very positive indicator on what is happening in Saskatchewan. And so there is some work happening at the federal, provincial, territorial immigration ministers meeting right now, where various provinces, led by the co-chair, who happens to be Minister Harrison from Saskatchewan, and then Minister Fraser, the federal minister, on exactly how we are going to work through the 500,000 commitment the federal government made, and how that is going to be divvied up with respect to provincial nominees versus federal nominees. What we have said is all 15,000 should come, at least 15,000 should be Saskatchewan's number, and 100% of those should be provincial nominees, so that we can prioritize. Pardon me?
Would you like to increase that number, or would you like to see?
Well, 15 would be our share of the 500,000.
I mean, would you like to see 25,000,
Sure.
30,000?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, once they're into Canada, they will move around within Canada. And I think, with the positive environment that Saskatchewan has over the next couple of years, we may see some in-migration as well. But, 15 would be a significant increase from 9. And if we could fill 15, yes, we should be able to go beyond that. The other thing I think that's important for us is that you talked about the birth rate, but is to continue to keep our kids at home. And we're getting better at that. We're way better at that than when I graduated high school, when it was nothing short of a mass exodus to the west. So we are much better than we were even a number of decades ago. But I think there's still room for us to move there.
Yeah, when I was in university, it was all about when you move into Calgary.
Yeah.
So even though oil prices spiked at $123 a barrel, we did not see a real boom in drilling activity in Saskatchewan. Things picked up, but it was absolutely not a return to boom days. Why do you think it worked out that way?
There's no reinvestment because of lack of certainty due to federal policy. That is nothing more that needs to be said.
So, and I guess what's happening with that is that companies are really leery to throw $500 million or $1 billion into an area where the federal government says, well, we're going to cap everything you're doing.
They won't do it, and nor should they, when no one would. And so, words have, as I've said a number of times, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of reality. Well, the reality is when you make a statement that you're going to cap emissions and productions in the energy industry, people are not going to invest in that industry. Even though a few months earlier you made a statement that you're going to increase the oil production by 300,000 barrels. You've done nothing to indicate that there's going to be any increase in the oil production. In fact, the policies that you've come forward with, and we talked about this last time, are quite the contrary. And they say that the policies are actually pressuring the volume of oil being produced down, even though it's some of the most sustainable oil that you can find on Earth. And so that is the number one issue that the Saskatchewan oil industry has, the Saskatchewan energy industry has, likely the Canadian energy industry, is a lack of certainty with respect to federal policy. I'm hopeful that will change at the next election.
And we talked about that in September. The federal government said back in April or so, we're going to increase oil production by 300,000 barrels.
Yep.
You have seen no evidence of that, correct?
Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. In fact, I think it's since then they've started to talk about capping emissions and production. And so, in addition to not putting forward any policy that would encourage 300,000 barrels to come on board and how to get rid of that 300,000, get it to market, they've come forward with policies that are directly the other direction in saying we're going to cap your emissions and we're going to likely cap your production. So it's policy that is wrong-headed and makes no sense with the words that they say, and that's why we're seeing the lack of investment. So by the time the next election comes around, either the policy needs to change or the government needs to change.
So this summer, the Chancellor of Germany came to Canada earnestly seeking liquefied natural gas. And he was told by the Prime Minister that there wasn't a business case. And he was taken to Newfoundland, where they showed him where they're going to build some wind turbines on the shore.
Yeah.
And they're going to turn water into hydrogen.
Yeah.
And they're going to turn that hydrogen into ammonia,
Yeah.
because you can't ship hydrogen overseas.
Yeah.
There's only one ship on the planet that can ship hydrogen. And they're going to ship ammonia across the ocean. They're going to use that supposedly for fuel. And then the Chancellor then went to the Middle East and Qatar and possibly UAE and signed some contracts saying, yeah, we'll buy all your LNG. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, I talked with. I have a counterpart in the UAE that I talked to since we were there this past year, and it was about 10 days after Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, was in Saskatchewan, that they were able to ink a memorandum of understanding with the Emirates and potentially Qatar on providing some LNG into Germany for this winter, which is when they ultimately need it. They weren't in Canada asking us to consider building some windmills so that we could build a building onshore in Nova Scotia, so that we could bring forward some technology that is maybe questionable at best today, but ultimately we'll get there into the future to turn water into hydrogen and then somehow ship it across the ocean as ammonia in some distant time. European Union has energy security issues today. They need their allied friends and neighbors to step in and help with this. We're doing that from Saskatchewan's perspective. You see Cameco now, with their recent purchase of Westinghouse, is actively looking at building various electricity reactors, nuclear reactors in that Eastern Europe area. There's a company that is doing the Canadian thing and stepping up and through commerce and providing that energy security for countries in an area where they previously haven't had it due to their policy decisions. The Prime Minister doesn't know if there's a business case that's positive or negative for LNG. And what I would say is, if you strip away some of their policies, that business case would markedly improve in this nation, not only for the production, the sustainable investment into the future, but also the egress and getting LNG to one of our allied neighbors, which in this case is Germany, but I would say anyone in the European Union should deserve access to it.
You touched on SMRs, and SaskPower is going around doing these presentations, and they did one in SFAN a few weeks ago, and I asked a number of questions at that. And I kind of said, look, you just made out the case that we don't have much hydro potential left. The federal government won't allow us to do coal. They're indicating we might not be able to do natural gas, or much more natural gas. So the broad hint is we have to build nuclear. But then they say, well, the decision won't be made until 2029. I mean, if we have to live under those circumstances, why don't you as a government say, now, look, we will go nuclear and that's it, and we'll figure it out in 2029 exactly what we're going to do, but make the decision now in 2023 and say, this is what we're going to do, we're going to find a way to make it happen, as opposed to putting off that decision for 6 years and having people in Coronach and Estevan and possibly Elbow wondering what's happening. Do I sell my house or do I lose another $100,000 on it?
Yeah, no, I was down in Coronach and met with the folks working at the power plant, as well as the community leaders, and I was appreciative for the input that they had. And we're working actively with the community on some opportunities that might arise there, as Coronach Poplar River is one of the plants that was scheduled to be out of service by 2030. Regardless, as it's finding its way to the end of life. Shand is the outlier, as it could run until 2042, obviously, and provide affordable power for Saskatchewan residents. I think you will see a decision, and not to contradict in any way the Saskatchewan Power Corporation, but I expect that you will see a decision on direction sooner than 2029. I think the people, in particular in Estevan and Coronach, deserve that decision sooner rather than later. One of the challenges, in fairness, not just to SaskPower but to the government proper, has been the murky, changing environment that we're working in. We've been making decisions in the last couple of years around natural gas where that environment now is all of a sudden changed with the clean electricity standard, saying natural gas will be phased out by 2035. And so we're consistently working in this very, where the ground is always moving in the environment in this space. And so it's difficult to lock something in and then. I think we just have to have an understanding that should there be a change in policy or change in government, there might actually be a change in some of our direction, because at the end of the day, what the goal is to have as affordable a power available for Saskatchewan people so that we can continue to attract investments and then just keep life as affordable as possible here. And so we're doing whatever we can to answer those questions in what is a very, very fluid environment.
Shifting gears, a year ago we started to see the emergence of serious helium development here. Mm-hmm. And currently we're seeing similar things happen with lithium.
Yeah.
In the last 16 months, we've seen 3 companies drill exploratory wells, and a total of 6 have emerged acquiring land. Lithium also appears to have a much, much larger potential, especially compared to helium, if they could work out the extraction technology. What are your thoughts on these new industries?
I think there's the first stuff extracted sitting on my desk there as we speak. That came over here with the Minister of Energy a while ago. I think this is great work by the industry, and really speaks to the innovation of Saskatchewan companies and ultimately Saskatchewan people that are working in this industry. Lithium is one of the needed products into the future. There's a number of other rare earth elements. Helium also is one of the products, not for energy, but is very much going to be needed into the future. And just I think it speaks to the opportunity that we have in Saskatchewan. We're still going to need oil, but we're going to need all of these other products as well, and the world is going to need them. And even today, when you look at the food, fuel, and fertilizer that we produce and then supply to over 150 countries each and every year, you start adding products to that. Where we're going is just even better than where we've been the last decade or so in this province. And we're going to firm up at some point in this nation and realize that the oil industry is among the most sustainable in the world, and we're going to have some policies at some point that are going to allow for that industry to operate and reinvest it. Maybe not in the next few years, but at some point in the next decade, we are going to have that opportunity. We have a vibrant mining industry, whether it be potash mining, uranium mining, whether it be copper mining. We have a net zero copper mine proposed. We have an agriculture industry that is again and aggressively climbing the value-added food chain. And so, I think the production of lithium, using essentially innovative technology that we already are using in the oil industry, is just speaks volumes to what Saskatchewan people essentially at the end of the day are capable of when presented with a challenge, a task, or an opportunity. And they just do so well in this space, and this is another example of that.
So I'm currently doing a series on it. It's actually very in-depth, and it's about 17 stories and about a third of the way through it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I discovered is that one of the companies is working on, they're currently at the pilot stage. Once they get to the commercial stage, they hope they can have plants that can produce 10 tons of lithium a day. And lithium a year ago was $29,000 a ton. And this year it's been around $65,000 a ton. Now that's spot price, that's not permanent contract. But let's say on permanent contract you get for $30,000 a ton, times 10 tons a day, that's $300,000 a day for one facility.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I think it's good. I do, because it isn't just the production facility or the processing facility that is the cost. There's jobs all the way up and down the line, and these are industries that I think are part of the future for our province. We often talk about food, fuel, and fertilizer, and when you look at in particular on the fuel side or the energy side, what we produce today, it's going to be needed for a while. Like oil is not going anywhere, despite what some folks will tell you. We need to continue to push and push the carbon emissions out of every barrel that we produce, and we're doing that in this province. But there is a need for additional energy sources, and lithium is going to be part of filling that need. Our rare earth elements are going to be part of, the battery technology that comes that is coming along, and so uranium and nuclear power is going to fill a growing need for energy into the future, and we have all of that right here. And so we have the fuel of today, but we also have the fuel of tomorrow in our province. And so the future in the next number of months and in the next number of decades in this province looks so very bright. And it's incumbent on us as a government to, start to map and plan out, how this growth is truly going to benefit everyone from corner to corner in the province of Saskatchewan.
You might have to modify your model there to be food, fuel, and batteries.
Yeah.
Food, fuel, fertilizers, and batteries. Doesn't roll off the tongue very well.
Yeah, the rare earth piece is interesting as we look ahead. But so is like lithium and helium. Are industries that, in fairness, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about a whole lot in this province. And in 10 years from now, I think we're going to be talking about them an awful lot in this province.
So it's funny you mention it about the 10 years, because that's my last question here. A key part of this lithium development has been the pioneering research by Saskatchewan Geological Survey, part of the Ministry of Energy and Resources, who have been working on this for 11 years, in particular a geologist by the name of Gavin Jensen. Mm-hmm. And I had a conversation with him back in 2013. And he said, there's lithium in these brines and all this water that's coming up.
There's oil in them hills.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he said, back then, he said, well, price is around $6,000, $7,000 a ton, and it could go up. It tripled from what it was before. And then, like I said, it was up to 21,000, 29,000. Now it's 60 to 80,000. So, and then similarly, assistant chief geologist Melinda Yurkowski spent a decade working on helium. And most of the foundational work that's been done from her work has turned into the helium development now, and Gavin's work is turned into lithium development now, and everyone says that's where it all came from. So, these provincial geologists have been plugging away on this literally for decades. And new industries are spawning as a direct result. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think thankful, for just individuals again in the public service that put their province in the development of our natural resources first. There's, individuals that, in addition to these two, but many on their teams and across government that, really, really are pushing at the very edges of innovation, technology, and opportunity, I would say, for this province as we look ahead. And so, these are two industries that are an example of tremendous opportunity, that I think financial opportunity that's going to come to Saskatchewan, tremendous opportunity to further provide the world with security of supply. But the same is happening in the rare earth space. This is how we built a uranium industry a number of decades ago, a potash industry decades previous to that. So we're just very fortunate, not only to folks in the public service, but folks that are working in all of these industries, as they're not only, pushing the boundaries on new elements that we can produce here in Saskatchewan, but pushing the boundaries on how we produce them. And, that is the Saskatchewan story. That's why we're moving forward with our Sustainable Saskatchewan branding. The fact of the matter is the products that we're producing here are as sustainable, and in most cases more sustainable than any other product you can find on Earth. That's true in oil, it's true in agricultural products, it's true in mine products, and that's something that we can be very, very proud of in this province, and I know we are, not just what we produce, but how we produce it, and we would invite all Canadians to be equally as proud, because when we send these products to the 150 plus countries around the world, they go with a Canadian maple leaf on them.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
I think I'd just say Merry Christmas to you and your family, and to all of your listeners as well. We have a choppy couple of years, personally, professionally, in whatever we do, but we have some smooth sailing ahead of us, and opportunities are coming. And I just think that the statement that Saskatchewan is now the place to be as opposed to be from has never been more true than today, and what's coming in the next number of years.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.